Welcome to Tune Up Tuesday, June 27th, 2021. This video is part 4 to a series entitled, When Overwhelmed with Emotions, What to Do to Get Back to Peace. In this fourth part of learning what to do with our emotions when we are overwhelmed, the key word is replace. We must replace our focus on achieving desires that are not in our control to focusing on doable goals that are in our control. Hey, this is Mark Olsey, author and creator of Pledge Talk, which is a how-to when it comes to having a healthy conflict conversation. Yes, you heard me correctly. It is possible to have a healthy conflict conversation rather than an argument. You can learn more at pledgetalk.com or joining in the conversation at community.pledgetalk.com. Over the last few weeks, I have been reviewing what we learned from our last class on emotions entitled, When Overwhelmed, What to Do with Our Thoughts and Emotions So We Can Get Back to Peace. I first talked about the importance of taking time to reflect. When you notice you are feeling anxious, angry, or depressed, ask yourself, what have I been hoping for or counting on to take place in order for me to feel okay or to feel at peace? Second of all, I talked about how we must recognize when we have hopes, expectations, or goals we are working towards that are not entirely in our control. We have developed misplaced hopes. I defined a misplaced hope as something I am hoping will happen in order for me to be or feel okay, or to experience well-being, but it is not in my control. Think about this. When I am uncertain if that something will happen, it leads to anxiety. When it is blocked from happening, I get angry. And when it seems as though it simply will not happen at all, it leads to some degree or some form of depression. Thirdly, I talked about how we must reframe our hope, our expectation, or our goal into a desire or a wish, even a deep longing, knowing we aren't in control of bringing it about. In last week's video, I shared an example of a couple struggling with a life-threatening illness. They were so hoping to hear good news from the doctor, but it wasn't the case. And though there would certainly be some very deep disappointment that they would wrestle with for weeks, perhaps even months or years to come, by reflecting, they might recognize they had a misplaced hope of where their sense of well-being was coming from, such as, only if we get good news from the doctor will we be okay. And because of recognizing they were not in control of the outcome, they could reframe that hope by changing what they thought and said to each other in a way that would sound something like this. We long for a good report from the doctor, but we can't base our hope on a good or bad report, or even whether we live or die. We must base our hope on something different. The question is, upon what can they place their hope at such a point in time? And in a broader sense, I can ask the question to all of us. Upon what or whom can we place our hope in today and really every day? The answer to that question helps us in the fourth part of learning what to do with our emotions when we are overwhelmed. And the key word is replace. We must learn to replace our focus on achieving desires that are not in our control to working on doable goals that are in our control. Here are a few examples. In the example above of the couple who heard the bad news, they could replace their focus on achieving desires that are not in their control with a focus on doable goals that are in their control. Specifically, they cannot change the news from the doctor or change the likely outcome from the disease, but they can replace that hope with a focus on what they can do with the remaining time they have left together as a couple. They can focus, for instance, on living out the kind of example or legacy they want to leave behind them as they conclude this part of their life together here on earth. A doable goal. Other examples. When a husband isn't communicating to a wife in all the ways she wants, she could replace her focus on getting him to do so, something not in her control, with a focus on a doable goal that is more in her control, such as thanking him for what he is doing in their communication and relationship, or what he is doing around the house that she appreciates. Or when a person on your team at work is not pulling their weight on a project, you could replace your focus on trying to get them to do so, again, something not in your control, with a focus on doable goals that are in your control. For instance, you could remind yourself that you do not know what is happening currently in that person's life that might be causing them to not be very involved. So instead, you make it your goal, a doable goal, to be the kind of person that extends grace to them. And you set out to do the best you can do on the project in the time that you have. At the very least, you can feel good about having done the best that you can do, and that you kept from griping at a person when you didn't know what all was happening in their life. A final example. When your teenager doesn't want to be of help in the family, you could replace your focus on arguing with them to change their attitude, which isn't in your control, with a focus on a doable goal. In this situation, for instance, the doable goal might be that you impose a consequence on the teenager that is in your control, such as letting them experience what it is like to not have someone, you for instance, to not have someone help them have food for dinner, or wash their clothes, or transport them to their friend's house. Note, this consequence would need to not be done in spite, but to simply give a lesson on the effects of what happens in life when we don't want to help others. A doable goal to give a lesson in life. One last thought. In all that I teach in Pledge Talk, the ultimate goal I have is to teach and model to others how to love well in the way that we relate to others. That is a doable goal. And in each of the above examples, the replaced focus is ultimately the same. Bottom line, it is to demonstrate love in one way or another. So as a final review, my coaching to you when you are overwhelmed or feeling anxiety, anger, or depression, do the following. First, pause to reflect on the origins of your thoughts and feelings. 2, recognize when you have goals and expectations that are not in your control that have become misplaced hopes. Thirdly, reframe those goals and expectations into desires. Fourthly, replace your focus on desires with focusing on doable goals that are largely in your control. Well, thank you for listening. This is Mark Olsey with Pledge Talk. And to learn more, go either to pledgetalk.com or community.pledgetalk.com.